I don't even know what we are. Hi. Introduce
Banana
yourselves,
phone.
minions.
We have a
are
banana
disorganized.
podcast.
Yep, we have a Scottishman. I am told he is wearing a kilt, but this
He
could be
is?
a lie. The
It's
penguins
always a
told me.
lie.
The question is, when aren't I wearing a kilt?
Ooh, then it's true. Good. Today we are talking about the juicy subject of ethics in video games. Someone's gonna
juice.
kill us.
Not yet, not
Awkward
yet.
silence.
I went there.
I'm pretty sure that the hitman got called off a while ago. Maybe.
I've been
Nah, the
leading him on
hitman was a woman
marriage
and I
dates.
sexed her to death.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. Because we've seen that Hitman trailer. We know how female assassins work. They show up as nun outfits, strip off into leather and latex with rocket launchers, and then you make them explode. Fun
God
times.
damn it, my one weakness. Latex and leather and with women. No!
Latex, leather,
It's
and women
really
yum
just
yum.
all downhill from there.
It's meh.
So, Eddie, what is your safe word?
Banana.
The safe word is...
You know, that explains a lot.
That's a pretty shite safe.
Girl.
That's a pretty terrible safe word, to be honest with you.
I know, that explains why he's not getting any.
Again,
Moving
that's
on.
why it's the safe word. Hey, you're not getting any either, monkey, so don't even try to play that one.
It's just too easy.
Well, I am easy.
You
It's
can't
Tuesday.
say that. You're still a virgin.
That's
I
why
know,
he's
right?
easy.
He's got a point. You offer him anything, he's gonna go for it.
No, trust me, I know that much at least. I got at least
So-
A standard.
I'll send you a fuzzy pink sock, okay?
Whoa.
I can find those at Walmart for God's sakes. Moving on.
So, ethics of video games.
He knows that they sell them at Walmart. We automatically know what's going on here.
Ethics in video games.
Putting on myself, thank you very much.
Yes, masturbating into socks is all about ethics. Yep. Anyway,
This explains a lot.
It's all about
Thanks
ethics
to-
when you're thinking about whose socks to use.
it's all about the girlfriends. Wash them first.
Go ahead, stick your
Not
foot in
even
there.
going
Nothing's
there.
happening. Why is my sock wet?
Yeah.
So thanks to Amazon, we now have the rumor that Deus Ex Human Revolutions is getting a director's cut edition for the Nintendo Wii. It's going to make use of the controller for a new enhancement for Mr. Jensen, and overall just going to have a bunch of upgrades, fixes, and bonus missions, which is kind of annoying as someone who owns and really likes this game, because I would be willing to pay for this. I mean, I understand I wouldn't get to use the features for the touchpad, but all the other features would be very nice, and we're not getting it. It's going to the Wii U people, which, to be fair, they need a new game, but we see this happen quite a lot. The Persona games are big on this. 3 actually got 2 director's cuts, but the second one was on the PSP. Persona 4 got its PSV director's cut. BlazBlue is big on making portable director's cuts, as is Disgaea. But to be fair to those games, at least they're coming out on a PlayStation handheld. Deus Ex went from being a PS3, 360, and PC game to Wii U director's cut.
Okay, can I throw another example in there? If you don't
Go.
mind? From the PS1 days, Final Fantasy Tactics, the game got ported to the PSP with a War of the Lions.
Mhm.
It being named War of the Lions. In that game, you were able to get 2 extra classes. One being the Dark Knight, where you could, not play as Batman, but
Oh
you
man,
would get,
my interest is gone.
you had to max out the squad. You had to max out the Mage, which that's a bitch in and of itself to do. The Black Mage, the Knight class, or it was definitely the Black Mage, and then level 8 in Squire, Black Mage, and then like level 4 and 5 and a couple other classes. It was a pain in the ass to get.
Mhm.
And then
I was actually going
there
to bring those up, that up in another segment, because these ones I've mentioned so far are director's cuts of recent games, whereas you'll also get games, Persona 1, Star Ocean 1, Final Fantasy Tactics, where they got
Sonic Adventure
one
DX.
about 10 years after the initial game, and that one kind of makes more sense because they're adding in the first two at least, they completely upped the graphics, so it's more of remakes. But again, that doesn't irritate me as much because those came out a long time after their original games, whereas the ones I just mentioned, they are like 6 months to a year later
I can
is when
understand
this
that.
happens.
But it's along the lines of, for me at least, you're releasing something that you could have put in the original game and didn't.
That's
Not
the
really when it
entire
comes to
idea
those
of a
older
director's
games.
cut,
I
Eddie.
know.
And
But
with
still,
again with Tactics and Persona 1 and Star Ocean, it kind of makes sense because the consoles they originally came out of aren't even used anymore. Like PS1, PS2 are behind us and have been for a long time. Whereas the
I'll be
aforementioned games are on consoles we still use: PC, PS3, 360.
I will say, going back to the topic of the whole Deus Ex remake,
Mhm.
I mean the fact that you go through some of the features they mentioned, for example, fixed boss battles. That was one thing that was a huge problem for me in Deus Ex Human Revolution when I originally got it on the PC, is the fact that the boss battles were just really easy. Like there were very easy ways to get around them, and they were kind of boring.
Mhm.
And the fact that I won't get any of that as like DLC or something like that. I mean, as far as they've announced, maybe that'll come later, maybe it won't.
Mhm.
But the fact that I'm not getting that now makes me feel kind of ripped off because I'm not gonna buy a Wii U just to re-buy the same game I already own with a few improvements.
Mhm. And some people might get on us for being feeling entitled, but as Adam said, we are willing to pay for it. It's not like we expect them to give us the updates for free. I'd buy it. Hell, I'd buy the entire new game if they
Mhm.
released it on PC, because
Mhm.
the boss battles in that game were crap, and an update would be worth another $60, I feel. And to
or
explain why the boss battles in that were crap, they were made by an entirely different studio because when it came down to crunch time, the ones making it didn't have it done. And the new studio didn't understand that a boss battle should be a test of all of the skills you've learned up to this point, which in Deus Ex, those skills range from stealth, full stealth, to combat. So when they did their thing, all you had to do is just shoot at the guys until they were dead.
Mhm.
Whereas they did their one DLC, and that boss fight was fine because if you wanted to, you could sneak past them. Just walk
Mhm.
by, hit the door button, goodbye. And if they can fix that, great. I want to play it, but as you mentioned, I'm not buying a Wii U for it. There still isn't a game I would buy a Wii U for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at the point now where I would, maybe I'd go back and buy like a Wii or something like that. But that's not really part of the topic. But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna buy a whole nother console just because they're like, well, we're gonna release it on this one, not the one you bought it for, though. Ha, money.
Here's my thing with director's cuts. I understand when you're re-releasing a game, you want to add a little more content so that there is that reward for buying that version of the game. But if
Mhm.
you're going to do director's cut, it needs to be that content needs to not be extra stuff that you can't get on other versions of the game. It needs to be something a little extra, kind of like when Arkham City Armored Edition, Arkham City was released on Wii U. The big change that Wii U got, you got a new armor. Nobody on Xbox that played on Xbox 360 or PS3 or PC really cared about the armor.
Mhm.
What the Wii U owners got in that edition was they got everything that previous owners had gotten. They got all the DLC stuff already on there, and they just got a little extra touch that wasn't any big deal. That's what a director's cut should be.
But there's a lot of
Well, I
games
wouldn't
like that,
call
which is why
when it went over to Wii U, I wouldn't exactly call that one a director's cut either. That's more of
wouldn't,
a
yeah.
Game of the Year edition. But yeah, exactly.
and it's the thing with that one, I wouldn't call that because it's the same with like one of the first games I played on the Xbox was Eternal Sonata. And two of my favorite characters in that game, you can't play on the platform I bought it for because I bought it for the Xbox because I don't own a PlayStation 3. Still don't. Maybe one day. On the PlayStation 3 version, you can play as them though, because there are those specific console features or characters that you get. It's like with the Wii U, talking about the Batman thing, you can zoom in with the pad to precisely aim your Batarang. Is one of the features that they showcase all the time when they show it at like demos and whatnot. But it's with Deus Ex, it's completely different because they're on active consoles. Like Deus Ex is still something that they're updating on the Xbox and on Steam and PlayStation 3. It's something that it isn't like a PS2 game that you're not going to be able to get anymore because it's hard to find, that they're re-releasing and deciding, oh, it's going to be a Wii U exclusive though.
Yeah, and that's probably why the best director's cuts work after a certain length or amount of time. After the next console generation. If you want to release a director's cut, wait until the next console generation and then do it. So, for example, some of the director's cuts that we essentially mentioned, it was that actually worked. It was several years after. I mentioned Sonic Adventure DX, which released on several platformers, and the reason it was released was because the Dreamcast was no longer around. Game I'm playing, doing a Let's Play for on my channel it doesn't come out and say it's a director's cut, but let's be honest. Chrono Trigger for the DS is a director's cut.
Mhm.
It has
Well, that's
new
what all of
endings,
these
it
games
has-
are. Is none of them
Yeah.
claim to be director's cuts, but that's what
Yeah.
they are. I have
But
one
in the
big
case of-
example though here. It's Tales of Vesperia for Xbox 360. This one is one of the ones that I find really annoying because it brings into question A, the director's cut issue, and B, the issue of console being unique to one console. I can't remember the term for it right now. My
Console
brain is farted.
exclusivity.
Yes, that's the one.
You're
Because
welcome.
what happened with Tales of Vesperia, they've never come out and say it, but this is the only thing that makes sense for me, is Microsoft paid them a lot of money to get it to be exclusive to the Xbox 360. Because the game came out, and then they, a couple years later, released a massive Director's Cut edition. This one could easily be called a remake of the game with all the new stuff they put into it. But it never came out over here. Even though the game sold really well over here, it never came out because it was a PS3 exclusive game. And that one is the one that, like, more than Deus Ex, that one really ticks me off because, in essence, with Tales of Vesperia, the game I spent, I think it was $50 on brand new, was a beta version of the full version that I will never get.
Funnily enough, I have Tales of Vesperia sitting on my shelf next to me right now.
And what's it? The only thing I know to fix this is they're currently working on a fan project to bring this game to America. What you have to do, they want you to do, is get a modded PS3, buy a legitimate copy of the Japanese version of the game, and then they're working on a fan translation. And it should never get to that point.
You shouldn't have to rely on the fans to translate it for you. That should be something that you are doing yourself. I mean, that's one reason why you mentioned things like
Cough, take a cough.
yeah, you mentioned something like the remake of Star Ocean. That's great because the only way I ever played the original Star Ocean game was because of a fan translation from Japanese to English, because the original never was released here.
Mm-hmm. That was the way with
And
me.
it-
I really like the Fire Emblem games, and most of the early versions I had to play through fan translation because we never
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
them. And those I can
Yeah,
kind of
like-
understand. They were difficult. They didn't think we would like them, but I don't
Yeah,
see
and then
why they don't
they
release
released them on
those
the
for
GBA, and
Virtual Console.
Well,
then they released them
that's-
on GBA, and we were good
yeah.
with them.
That's the tale of when you get to the 8-bit and 16-bit era. Is they didn't take a lot of chances.
So, can we all potentially agree that when it comes to these director cut games, if the developers decided to go, since we're doing this director's cut thing, releasing it as a full retail, why don't we go ahead and also make it to where people can download this via DLC, like Xbox Live Marketplace and PSN and other means by having it as DLC?
Mhm.
Yeah.
For
Pay, like, a
me, I
$20
think
price
that's
fee.
not only fair. If you don't do it, I have a sheet with I add a developer to it if they do something, like I put their name on it and what they have done, and if they get enough strikes on it, it gets to the point where certain developers, I either won't buy their games out of principle, or I will only buy their games on deep discount or used. And used is probably the worst one of the bunch there because that means they don't get any money, period. And I kind of implore other people to do this because one of the big things in the gaming industry is you vote with your money. And if you go around buying games indiscriminately, you're voting in a manner that says, you can screw me and I don't care.
Activision, cough, cough, Activision.
Well, that's been a very hot button issue with things like with the new SimCity, for example, in that people are saying boycott EA, boycott all of their games because they're a horrible company. But people forget the fact that a lot of their favorite games are made by developers who are owned by EA.
Exactly.
It's not a matter of boycotting all the games a company makes. It's a matter of boycotting the games that make you that do things that you don't agree with, like SimCity with the always-on DRM.
Yes, and if you're going to do that with your consoles at this rate, because there are some rumbles with the new Xbox Durango possibly having to do always-on DRM sort of things, that's for another podcast, especially when it comes time next month for it to drop with the big info thing. I'll hold my tongue till then.
Yep. I've got a tirade for then as well. But moving on, we've mentioned DLC. Everyone loves DLC because it takes the game you pay $60 for and allows you to put some more money into lengthening the lifetime of the game. Now, what people don't like, and there's a lot of contention over, is the idea of Day 1 DLC. This one came really big into light with Mass Effect 3 when they released a character for download on Day 1 that was later found out to be on the disc, which was later discovered that he wasn't entirely on the disc. His animations were there, but his voice and several other things weren't. But we've also got the idea of, and that brings in the content on the disc that needs to be unlocked, which the most recent Marvel vs. Capcom game did.
Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom.
Ultimate Marvel
3.
vs. Capcom. And you had characters on the disc that you couldn't access until you unlock them, which I'm actually going to roll that into the next part, which is the licenses. If you read through your Steam things or look at the thing you sign or you click yes on when you pop some console games in, it's a license telling you that essentially what they are selling you, because they have decided that they no longer sell you the game. They just sell you the right to play the game, which I find to be one of the most insulting things about modern gaming. Because if you're on Steam, all of those games, you don't own any of them. You just own the license to play them until Steam decides you don't get to play them anymore for whatever reason.
Well, that's kind of a way to cover their own asses. I mean, just to be honest with you, because if by some horrible circumstance, when the day that Steam does shut down, they don't want to be sued by people who are like, well, I bought that game, I own it. No, you bought the right to play it through our service.
I think it's yes, it serves multiple purposes. For online games, it's kind of their way of saying the game's not going to be around forever. For Steam, it's their way of saying that. But I also feel with some of these day one DLC, it's telling you you don't own anything in this transaction. The only right you have is the right we give you to play the game. So with games like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, that license is saying that you have the disc in your possession. You have the right to play the disc, but you do not have the right to play with the characters we put on the disc until we give it to you or you pay us.
I that just feels like you're ripping the gamer off. We paid good money for these games, and for me, I like to actually have the games in my possession if at all possible, because I know, you know, I like to play past generation games, and you basically saying, you don't get to do that anymore, is just plain insulting. I bought the game, I want to play it. That's the whole reason why you're making these games.
Exactly, and think of it this way. They say a lot of things about piracy, like this causes piracy and that causes piracy, but think about it this way. This practice right here causes piracy, because some people,
Yeah.
if you're going to release a game like that, they don't like the practice, they're going to pirate it. It's not because they would have pirated it anyway. It's because they don't like your ethics. Though I like to call those ethical pirates, the ones who pirate games based on what the decisions of the developer, not based on their own personal welfare.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, when it comes to something like Steam, where it's licensed for games, and I have several games on my Steam which are not multiplayer games, they are single player games. There's no reason why I shouldn't own it. If and when it comes down to Steam shutting down or me losing the right, I will keep a list of all those games I own. I will pirate the crap out of them, because in my mind, I bought them, I own them.
Well, here's the one for the no reason why you shouldn't own it. Think of this one. A lot of companies don't want you to be able to reverse engineer their games. It's their kind of way of keeping control over their intellectual property, which again I think isn't entirely wrong. I think isn't entirely right. I think when you put your software out, other people should have the right to reverse engineer it to learn from it. Obviously, if they try and copy your work, you should be able to sue their pants off. But there are a lot of companies, and you can look on your Xbox, some of your Xbox discs, they don't want you tampering with the code of the game. They say
not.
they will sue you for that. But as I said, I think that's unethical, because you should be able to learn from it.
See, and I think.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
It's much the same as if I'm an author, I'm reading these books. It's much the same as I am taking a book, I own the book, and I'm dissecting the way somebody writes and watching their style so that I can learn from it. It's the same thing. They don't want to think to it like they don't want to think of it like that, but it's exactly the same thing.
Well, I'll bring 2 points here.
Mhm.
A is the first one where you're talking about single player games on Steam. For Steam, it's less the fact that they don't want you to own the game. It's the fact that they don't want you to they want to cover themselves, like I said, in the eventuality that their service dies. Because by saying that you just that you own the right to play the game, not that you have the actual game, because once the service dies, you can't download it anymore.
Mhm.
That's the reason why they do that.
Mhm.
Because they don't want you to go, well, I own this game, why can't I access it? Well, because our servers don't really exist for that anymore. Well, I should sue you then. That's kind of a legal problem. I think that's more of their justification for it.
That, and
And
you'll
as far
notice
as
with a lot of
reverse-
these smaller indie games and some major games, though not many, you still have the ability to go into, without Steam open, I've noticed a lot, if not all of the indie games I own, you can go into their folders and open them up and
Yes.
download them. So in a lot of situations, it would be more of a thing of, yes, keep a list of what you have on Steam. If they were to suddenly just completely blow up tomorrow, then go pirate your stuff. But a lot of the stuff that was on your computer would still work.
Correct.
Like
Yeah.
I think it's a bit in the middle. I think it's a combination of covering their ass and protecting, or put this in quotes, protecting intellectual property.
Yeah. And I agree with that. I also think that when it comes to the topic of intellectual property, you mentioned that you think we should be able to reverse engineer pretty much any game we buy. I kind of disagree with that in a way.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of developers when they code games and they put these out there, they're very protective of them because it's like their baby. And you definitely don't want people tampering with your baby. So
Yeah.
I can fully understand that. I can fully understand not letting people do that because it is basically like them messing with your children. And I think that you don't have to be able to reverse engineer the game to learn from it. You play it to learn from it. You learn from the storytelling style, the graphic style, and if you're actually going to get into developing a video game, then you can learn enough from it just by playing through it and analyzing it to know what's going on. If you want to like look into the code of it, maybe, but that's more along the lines of you're trying to make something like their game. And I think that's something that they should be protecting themselves from, especially indie developers.
Okay,
Actually, I
I'm
want
going.
to
I'm.
speak here.
I'm going.
Speaking as a game designer here, I can counter those points to a bit. Their game designers tend to be focused in a bit. You've got your story writer. Each person learns something different from a game. Like your musician will learn the way the music ebbs and flows as the game moves around. The writer will learn from the story. The coder, though, the person who actually builds the mortar and the glue, learns nothing from that. What he has to do is he's not so much trying to rip off the game. He just wants to know what makes a game tick, like what formulas they use to make certain random drops, how they put their formulas together, how their engine works. Like, it's not about stealing in coding. It's about like I said, it's about learning, like seeing
No.
methods.
And I understand that. My thing is more. Sorry, I'll let you go in a second. My thing is more. I'm more focusing those comments on indie games because most indie games are made in things like Flash or XNA back when they.
Flash,
I mean,
XNA, Game Maker, those kinds of things.
Exactly. And I mean, when it comes to things like XNA, they're not very hard to program in.
No.
I think that when it comes to big major titles that are made in programs like made in various more complex programming languages or are made in like things like Ruby, and Ruby on Rails.
Python,
I think that
C++, those kinds of things.
Yeah. I think that those are more rapidly protected. I have strong feelings about the indie crowd and their games being protected particularly.
Well, that's
just
the thing.
because
In the indie crowd, you see they're generally more likely to put their source code out there.
Yeah, they are, because they do want to foster the community on that. I have seen enough of them taken advantage of in ways that it makes me uncomfortable with how they share code, and I don't want to discourage them from doing it, certainly, but I don't think it's always the best idea, or it depends on to what degree they do it.
Yeah,
And
anyway.
here I am going to argue devil's advocate for sharing the code. Can you hear me?
go for it.
Yes.
Everything went deathly silent. I was kind of worried there. But the whole reason is, okay, let's look at it, and I'm going to be focusing mainly on the PC scene because you're not going to see this as much on consoles. But for
You'd
the
be
major
surprised,
games
actually.
on the PC scene, we're going to be looking games such as Skyrim on PC, Minecraft on PC, and some other games on PC. The big thing about those is modding. And saying, oh, you can't look at the code whatsoever and can't know how this game runs, is you're going to lose a big part of the community and what makes those games so great on PC.
Well, Skyrim
there's a
and
difference, though.
Minecraft are a bit different there because those have modding tools released by the developers, which I would like to see more PC games do.
For sure.
Because if you don't want them digging through your code, that's what you have to do. You have to give them modding tools, and you can learn from the modding tools, actually. Having gone through the Garden of Eden creation kit for the Fallout games enough, you can see, without getting into the source code, you can see how things interact with each other, which is another good thing for learning.
And that's the thing. Those games are all sandbox games. You look at, your Elder Scrolls games, your Fallout, your GTA even. There's a big GTA 4 modding community for PC. Minecraft and things like that. I mean, it's a bigger modding community depending on what kind of game you're making. I think there was even a fair number of mods for Deus Ex Human Revolution, to go back to that game.
The only mod I've seen and the only one I use is the one that adds a debug menu to it.
Well,
that's it, but-
let's even go look into something that is not so current. Let's look at ROM hacks.
That's actually
the big
exactly
ROM hacking scene.
relevant. But ROM hacks, I'm not entirely sure where to go on those, because ROM hacks are really good for one big thing, and that is definitely learning. I know a lot of programmers who got their start into video game programming through ROM hacks. One very specific is a remake of Mega Man 1 called Mega Man Powered Down. If you can Google that, find that online, it's a pretty fun game to play.
Yeah.
All right, but we're running long, so going to get to the next topic. When going back to Mass Effect 3, when it came about, there was a huge thing on false advertising because Casey Hudson, lead writer for that game, made a lot of promises that did not seem to have been met with the full game. And a lot of, in Europe, I don't know where this ever went. I have to do some research on it, but they said that, yes, this is false advertising and yada yada. And it actually brings up, what exactly is false advertising? Because I'm going to bring my thing here. Casey Hudson was the one saying these things. The commercials never made any promises. They were mostly just play epic music while Commander Shepard runs around a battlefield. So I don't think it's false advertising, but should Casey have been saying those things about a game when they hadn't been implemented yet? Or were they implemented and taken out? Should they have said something about it? Because a lot of people got disenfranchised by that game because of things that their head writer said.
Give an example, my good sir. That way, for those who don't know.
He specifically said the ending of the game will not be your typical ABC solution. You will have a lot of options. It will diverge in many ways. Each ending will be one ending could be vastly different from another, and the full game had ABC endings. Exactly what he said it wouldn't.
It was ABC. I looked up a few spoilers for the endings, but the thing is, most of the endings led, at least that I know of, led to Shepard death, and then he lives.
Okay,
It was Shepard death, and potentially maybe kind of sort of living. That was what it amounted to.
Yeah, let's be honest. It was essentially the same ending, only the explosions were different colors in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when we got the big DLC that quote overhauled the ending, what we got was a D. We got an ABCD ending, which the D was to shoot the little bastard and then suffer the consequences. And they expounded on what happened after the big decision. And I think Casey might have said, if you asked him, that those different things that could have happened based on all the decisions you made are what amount for your ending. But I think that would be missing the point somewhat. And the point was that the final decision should have been vastly different based on what you had done. Because someone who didn't put a lot of time into gaining their resources should not have gotten the same choices as me, who spent as much time over 3 games getting as many resources and as making as many of the what I feel right decisions as possible.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, because it's one of those things where I know you. How many hours did you pour into each game? I'm going to ask that question first.
In the first game, about 60. In the second, damn near 100. And in the third one, about 80. Unless we're counting multiplayer, in which case it could be close to 500.
So, discounting multiplayer, roughly about 240 hours. gamers.
Yeah.
So the person who's just gonna probably go, oh hey, Mass Effect 3 is the big new thing now. I'm just gonna make a new character and then, well, let's just see. I can make a character that has had these decisions in mind, doop, and then we just go from there. No, it's one of those things to where, to the person who did the 240, put in the hours and hours and hours and hours of grinding and playing and getting their Shepard to where they feel they did the proper things. To the person who just picked it up on the fly and went do and did it, they should not have the same endings. Period. If you're gonna make it to where your Shepard at the end dies, because I expected it, especially after playing 2. I was expecting me be war hero, me sacrifice self, because that's how it goes with big war heroes. But don't do that.
Well, that's the other thing that annoyed a lot of people, is that it was so constricted, because they make the joke, and I would have actually liked to have seen this as a joke scene. If you did everything right, get the just an ending that shows a postcard of Shepard and Garrus drinking beer on a beach with a dead Reaper in the background.
Yeah. I'm going to look at this from a writer's point of view, and that is just without even having heard about the false advertisement or whatever, and knowing the whole deal with Mass Effect 3, I would have known right from the beginning that there's no way he could ever meet those expectations, because that's biting off way more than you can choose to develop that many endings, to write that many endings and try to anticipate all those possibilities, and then expect your programmers to program that in. There's no way he should have ever made that statement. He should have known better. He should have known that there's no way that was feasibly realistic.
Exactly, and that's the main point I was going for with this is, as a video game developer, a writer, anything, I think the big thing we've learned from this is, when they say something, when they make a promise, don't buy into it. Don't get into the hype. Wait until there's an official announcement, not just something. And then that brings in, what's an official announcement? It's the CEO of the company. If he says something, then he can be blamed if something goes wrong. I don't think you can really blame Casey Hudson in this situation. He did something stupid, sure, but we should have never listened to him in the first place. I think that's our fault. And I think that's where we're ending today. Give us a like, comment, tell us if we were wrong, insult us. We will insult you back. We like insulting. We
are insulting.
We're all insulting.
See
Also,
you
your
next
mom's
week,
a hooker.
people. Play us off, Eddie.
But fine, I went to a fight and a hockey game broke out. I'm done.
change.